So we are part of the team, of the DataOS team. We're based in Europe. What is DataOS? DataOS is the operating system on top of Arweave. And I give it up to Christian.
Thank you, Ivan. And I want to start with the question that brought us here, basically, that we tried and started to solve with DataOS, which is what the hell is stored on Arweave and what are people doing with it? And as you know, Arweave is pretty huge. I mean, if you look at all the different metrics that you can access right now, you can be pretty sure that it's an immense network. Maybe you don't know off the top of your head how big, but it's big, and no one really knows up until. As I said, the problem with figuring out what is stored on Arweave is that it is huge. How huge? It's about 160 terabytes of data. It's about 1.3 transactions. Each of those transactions can be a file. Doesn't have to be, but it can be. If you just take the metadata, right? So just the descriptive data about files and transactions and everything that's happening on the layer one. This plain metadata is 2 terabytes. If you look at the number of protocols, there are at the time shot over 1,200. I think it's by this time this talk is now being shown, it's probably closer to 1,300. So it's a lot of protocols, a lot of builders. People are doing a lot of stuff on Arweave, and each is doing more or less his own thing. I mean, there are some standards to harmonize this work, but it's still a very diverse chain. So if you ever had this problem where you want like a specific piece of content on Arweave, that is more like finding a needle in a haystack. And the haystack is actually a huge, massive mountain higher than Mount Everest. So this is kind of a hard problem, is what I want to say. But we tried to solve this, and we succeeded in this to some extent. We're not 100% there in the journey, but let me give you some findings today. And how we did this is basically by approaching this problem as a big data problem, where we go through layer by layer. So obviously through the main layer, the storage layer, the Arweave layer one, through SmartWeave, respectively Warp, and also look at the layer that is not as easily examined, the content layer, where like the actual file content is stored. And we looked at this layer by using AI, but a bit more on that later. And yeah, I mean, it's a tough thing, and it took a lot of time, a lot of headaches also, obviously, and a lot of heart to dig through it. But we made sense of it, and we are happy to share some insights today with you. So let's start with something fairly straightforward, right? I mean, this is probably something like the first, the most big picture thing you would ask about Arweave. Like, what are the content types stored on Arweave? And here we are looking at content types by number of transactions. Obviously, it looks a bit different if you look by size, as like, you know, images and videos are much larger than JSON files and text files. But just by number of transactions, you can see that Redstone, the creators of Warp, have a huge chunk of, I like the most prominent content type on Arweave, followed by JSON. And here we get to this problem of the many protocols, because while JSON is the second biggest block, there's a lot of variety in this JSON. As you can see, there's a lot of unknown JSON, right? Not where you can't, as of yet, determine the app. There's a lot of Twitter data. There's a lot of CyberConnect, Arweave, and other things. The third most prominent content type, which is a little bit of a paradox, is actually the undefined content type. This is content type that was written without specifying. It is content without specifying a content type. So, I mean, if people just like upload encrypted stuff, or they don't want you to open it as easily, obviously they would just skip the content type, or maybe they don't care. Maybe it's just for them, right? Private stuff. Or maybe they just forgot it. We don't know. But if you exclude that, the third actual most prominent content type are images. And these are, by the way, if you go by size, actually the largest content type, right? So most of the storage is occupied by images on Arweave. Another question that is also very interesting with regards to Arweave usage is like, which protocols are in the last 6 months are pushing all these transactions. And here we have a nice chart. We can see that CyberConnect is very strong. They've been generating a lot of activity on Arweave, followed by an evergreen app and all-star, Arweave, real OG. Alex, very prominent now, coming up, fairly new, but you can see them rising. And then we have like the decentralized social stuff like Lenster, Anostar, and some other cool protocols. So this was easy kind of because this was just layer 1 data, but what about SmartWeave? Obviously with the recent launch of Bazaar, we are all wondering how is U adoption coming along now that there's a good way to spend it, and specifically maybe how many users of U are there. When we started looking at this problem, we also kind of hit a bit of a speed bump because SmartWeave is not as straightforward as you would wish, because a SmartWeave transaction is both a layer 1 and a layer 2 transaction, where the storage of the transaction happens on the layer 1, but the execution of the transaction happens on the layer 2, which is Warp, which in the end results in two sources of truth. So you have to kind of combine both layer 1 and layer 2 data to figure out the validity of the actual SmartWeave transaction. We did that. We figured out how many users U has. Here you can see like cumulative users since the beginning of U. We had 1.3 thousand users. Transactions are going on. Mints are going. I mean, as you can see, mints are still the most prominent action here. There are some transactions happening, but I would say we are on a good path. So much for layer 2. But I'm sure you are asking, can we go deeper? Can we actually go look at the content that is stored on Arweave, which we call layer 3, or the content layer? Because the content on Arweave is actually like the gold buried, the treasure that is buried on the permaweb, because this is where Arweave is unique, right? In other crypto networks, you usually just have the layer 1 and layer 2, and it's just transactions basically compute, executing and pushing tokens from A to B. But Arweave actually also stores data, and a lot of it, but it is very hard to discover it due to lack of tags, and generally it's very hard to look at it, right? Because I mean, how it is used currently is basically people interact with a specific protocol and they basically deposit or save protocol specific data on Arweave, and then only the protocol that published the data is actually using it again. And we figured, wouldn't it be cool if you could actually, irrespective of like knowing the protocol, look at what is stored on Arweave? And the solution we came up with for this is analyzing this content with LLM and just descriptive statistics to kind of assess the quality of individual pieces of data. So let's say like posts or like all the different kind of posts you have on decentralized social, let's say Anostar and Lenster and things like that, and blog posts like Mirror. And using this data that we gather from these statistics and LLMs to build sort of like a virtual ANS 110 file system, tagging system. If you don't know what ANS 110 is, it's basically a set of tags that should be defined to make content discoverable. And these tags are topic, description, summary, and type. Unfortunately, not as widely adopted as we wish, hence the need for this virtual ANS 110 system. And this allows you then basically to look at the content and like sort of categorize it and make and things like that. And just to give you like some idea of what you can answer then, we looked at which languages are people using in decentralized social that is happening on Arweave, right? Obviously, English is by far the most used language, which is why we excluded it here. Otherwise, the chart would have looked pretty boring, to be honest, unfortunately. But as you can see, aside from English, there's also many other active languages. Indonesian, Vietnamese, Spanish are the top 3 if you exclude English. Next, we have looked at what are people talking about on decentralized social networks. And that's not that much of a surprise. I mean, people on crypto-powered or like crypto-affiliated social networks talk a lot about technology, about finance, and about cryptocurrency. These are like the 3 top topics. Obviously, there's also some other interesting stuff which you could request with our API. I mean, there's also like travel content and like personal stuff people post. Obviously, a lot of shilling for different projects, but broadly, obviously, like technology, finance, cryptocurrency. So we figured, okay, if there's this topic, it would be very interesting to actually look at which crypto people are talking about. And you can see it's sort of like I would say it kind of correlates with market cap. For the most part, you also have some interesting upcoming or fairly new L2s and things like that that people talk about. So yeah, maybe not too many surprises here. And yeah, so we went from this huge mountain of hay and we organized it into these 3 neat layers of hay, right? These this nice organized pile. Thank you for listening and enjoy the rest of the event and enjoy the rest of the days in Singapore, and hopefully see you next time in person.
If you see Otto Hayes, say hi.
Yeah.
Peace.